Now finally, we end with a short discussion of Sensory Discrimination Disorder, or SDD, the third primary pattern of sensory processing disorder. Children with SDD have difficulty interpreting sensory information. This translates into problems giving the correct meaning to sensory input. They have trouble distinguishing among similar stimuli. In the visual domain, for example, a B may look like a D. In the auditory domain, a cap may sound the same as cat. In the tactile domain, a penny may feel like a nickel. In the smell domain, garlic odor may be indistinguishable from cleaning products. In the proprioceptive domain, when to push hard versus when to push lightly may be tough to determine. In the interoceptive domain, any minor stomachache may be indistinguishable from a severe stomachache. In the vestibular domain, movement upwards may be indistinguishable from movement downwards. It is not unusual for a child to have excellent discrimination in one sensory domain, but problems in other sensory domains. Children with sensory processing disorder often have excellent visual discrimination, but poor auditory and/or tactile discrimination. Let me add just a short note about the word discrimination. That word was chosen a few years ago from many similar terms that can be confusing. Other words that are used to define the same developmental area are perception and executive function. Discrimination also has different meanings than those that are used here. For example, in the reading literature, discrimination is used to indicate the way a person perceives the differences and similarities among words. In the optometry literature, discrimination is defined as seeing the differences between objects or visual stimuli. And on visual perceptual tests, visual discrimination tasks are often limited to items that require a person to match one visual stimuli to another. Rather than trying to solve this semantic problem with definitions, we use the word discrimination to refer to the higher level executive function tasks. These include comparing and contrasting stimuli and interpreting or making meaning out of basic sensory stimuli that are detected. Children with sensory discrimination disorder have difficulty in one or more sensory systems, distinguishing the size, quality, shape, and texture of sensory stimuli. These difficulties may lead to confusion and misinterpretation. Johnny is a second grader with SDD. His teacher said, "Now push your book off to the side of your desk so you can write on your paper." And Johnny pushed his thick, hard-covered textbook so much that it fell off his desk and onto the floor. "Jonathan, stop that fooling around," said his teacher. "We are in school, not playing with our friends at home." Johnny did not know what the weight of his book was. He had poor proprioceptive discrimination. He was unable to grade his muscle tension and force correctly to push his book across the desk with control. Have you ever picked up a suitcase or a box you thought was full and found it was empty? For the child with SDD, feeling the weight of the textbook accurately may be difficult. Symptoms of sensory discrimination disorder may manifest in one or multiple sensory systems. SDD is often assumed to be behavioral rather than sensory. Some examples of SDD are tactile, unable to dress quickly; proprioceptive, poor penmanship; auditory, unable to follow directions exactly or slow to respond; visual, poor reading; vestibular, fear of heights; gustatory, picky eater; olfactory, refuses to go into a restaurant; interoception, frequently in the nurse's office. Again, as we have seen before, sensory discrimination disorder affects a child's sense of him or herself. They may be labeled as slow or unmotivated. This can cause long-term problems that even a lifetime of therapy cannot undo.
First grade, all students took an intelligence test that required us to draw pictures. My first grade teacher was so excited by the results that she shared the information with my parents. Raylyn must be very intelligent. She drew eyelashes, eyebrows, etc. Poor Miss Pollock, when she tried to teach this highly intelligent child to read, I could not catch on. The 1962 solution? She had me join all 3 reading groups. I was a red bird, a yellow bird, and a blue bird. After reading comes spelling. The weekly spelling words stuck terror in the heart of my parents. It took at least 6 hours of effort and study to result in a passing outcome. Because I was highly intelligent, I must be lazy not to learn the spelling words. 4th grade was assigned to the remedial reading program, which, as everyone knew, was for the dummies. A middle school teacher announced to the whole class that I should sleep with a copy of the Webster's Dictionary under my pillow. Telling teachers that I could hire someone to spell when I grew up was not a winning position. In high school, college-bound students learn a foreign language. It was decided Latin would be the best option because it might help with my spelling. I worked on Latin morning, noon, and night. At one parent visitation, my Latin teacher commented to my mother that I must not be working very hard. My father had to restrain my mother from physically hurting the guy. On to college. Foreign language required. I was an art history major, so telling was logical. Plus, I had a great foundation in Latin. I was in the language lab daily, working hard on learning the pronunciation. My professor called me in and said there was a pattern of mistakes in my dictation. The results made her suspicious. So she sent me to the University of Virginia School of Education. Based on their review of my Italian papers, it was determined that I had an audio form of dyslexia and did not hear all the syllables in my words. In 1974, my exception from foreign language was one of the first ever for UVA based on a learning disability. The dyslexia, a visual sensory discrimination disorder, made me a more focused and determined person, so I actually believe my career flourished as a result. Plus, spell check was invented, and I did hire people who could spell and proof.
Finally, our last video in this series, briefly introducing the 6 subtypes of sensory processing disorder. A therapist is working on sensory cognitive opposites and has already completed heavy light, big little, and float sync. In this clip, the child is trying to differentiate fast and slow, but that is hard, as he just wants to go, go, go.
And does the race car go fast or slow? I think the race car goes really fast. Can you make them go really fast? All right, what about our turtle? Does he go fast or slow? He goes slow. Does he go?
Could you show us how turtles go really slow?
Oh, that looks like a fast turtle.
But turtles don't go fast. We gotta see a slow turtle like this. Could you copy?
That's a good slow turtle.
Slow turtle. Good job.
So, let's crawl like a slow turtle all the way to the swing. Are you ready?
Okay, we're gonna all be turtles now. Oh, slow turtles. Slow.
Uh-oh, that's a fast turtle.
That's too fast. You gotta come back here with us. You can't leave us behind.
We're so slow.
Oh.
Oh, man.
No. What do we do? Come back over here and show us what to say.
All right, let's see our slow speed.
Slow.
Oh, there it is. Good job.
Discrimination disorder is very tricky sometimes to detect. Sometimes children with discrimination disorder are thought of as being intellectually or cognitively inferior. Actually, it's a sensory problem, but it can look like a problem with understanding or an intellectual problem. So getting a correct diagnosis is the most important thing you can do for a child with a discrimination disorder, so people don't misunderstand and think it's a learning disability. This concludes our first course in the e-learning program of SPD University. The subsequent programs will provide more details about each primary pattern and the SPD subtypes. One message I hope you do take away from this introduction is this. SPD is a sensory issue, but the real problem for individuals with SPD is that it causes issues in emotional, attentional, motor, self-care, learning, and other areas. These secondary issues can cause severe problems that affect not only early childhood, but also all of a child's life. In addition, the problems a child has can easily turn into family issues as parents struggle to take care of what are called difficult children. So as we caregivers and therapists for children with sensory processing disorder need to understand and treat not only the child, but the family as well. In subsequent courses, we will be focusing on each sensory subtype and describing how to detect the problems and briefly some key aspects of intervention for each subtype. But remember, SPD is not just about a child's life. It affects the whole family. And as it says in the title of my first book, Sensational Kids, there is hope and help for SPD. Yes, we want to reduce the sensory symptoms, but more importantly, we want to improve quality of life for those with SPD. We need to support families in the reality of the disorder. Since SPD is not yet in diagnostic manuals, it does not have a code, and thus many professionals, school systems, and insurance companies do not think it is a real disorder. So families often feel alone and unsupported. We have the opportunity to change lives and return children to their loving families by reframing their behavior problems as sensory issues and providing an understanding of how families can proceed to build a sensory lifestyle that supports their child's development with strategies that not only change behaviors, but alter the brain as well. For adults with SPD, there is also hope. If you are motivated to make a change, we can help you. You are never too old to benefit from treatment if you have SPD. Trust your instincts and seek out a trained provider. And for more information on SPD, the subtypes of SPD, and treatment for SPD, please visit our websites. And before we can say goodbye for this time, let's finish with some really powerful video from a couple of parents.
And his associations to all of Denver now are so positive. I think it's because this is his place where he became known, and the place where we began our relationship. We began to see him, and he flourished. So his language now, that was so excelled, was now related. He told me he loved me.
It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And you have to pace yourself, and you have to know that there are ups and downs and good days and bad days. And in the end, there are a lot more good than bad.
Internationally, the way that diagnoses become accepted is through a book called the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, which is for short the DSM. When you go to the doctor and they circle a number on your bill and you turn it in and they know what your diagnosis is, that number comes from the Dsm Book or one other book. The DSM is published about every 15 years or so. The last one came out in 1994. The next one was supposed to come out in 2012 and is now coming out in 2013. We have had a nationwide effort to try to get sensory processing disorder into the DSM ever since the year 2000. Hundreds of people have been involved, many scientists, many parent groups, and we are hopeful, but we won't know for some time yet whether or not sensory processing disorder is included in the new DSM when it is published. If we do not get into the DSM this time, the next time we can try is the year 2025.